The Lord had said to Abraham, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." So Abraham left, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarah, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. Abraham travelled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abraham and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he went on towards the hills east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. Second of our hymns is number 4. And for the second of our readings, we turn to the letter to the Hebrews in chapter 11, reading from verse 8. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land, like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. Where he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. By faith, Abraham, even though he was past age and Sarah herself was barren, was enabled to become a father because he considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the seashore. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, and they admitted that they were aliens and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were looking for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. I don't know how many of you have ever been on a camping holiday. Don't be shy. Put your hands up. If you've ever slept in a tent. I went camping once. I was in the clubs. And we went away for a weekend. Now, I was only young, and it would have been the first time I'd been away from my parents, so I was not looking forward to it to begin with. We slept in one of these round bell tents, the pole down the middle, and everyone slept with their feet pointing in towards the pole. It was an old tent, which meant that it didn't quite fit. So it leaked. The water got in underneath. The ground sheet wasn't it wasn't what it ought to have been. So by the morning, everyone was thoroughly miserable and not enjoying it at all. And as for the toilets, well, that's another thing altogether. Let's just say my love affair with the clubs finished that day. And ever since then, I've never slept in a tent. And I don't intend to. Even though today some tents have the appearance of a 5-star hotel, I still will never ever again sleep in a tent. So apologies to those of you who love your camping holidays. You carry on. Don't expect me to be there. Abraham pitched his tent and he built an altar. The thing about camping, as we learned on that weekend, was that what was required, that when the time came to move on and the tent was taken down, you had to see to it that the site was left in such a way it was as if you'd never been there. So you had to make sure that the ground was returned to how it should have been. And that was a challenge in itself, but I could understand that. So by the time we left on that particular day, you wouldn't have thought we'd been there. But we had been. And for a while we lived there. And our tent had been pitched, but now it's taken down. One of the most poignant conversations I ever had as a minister was with a gentleman. His wife came to church, and he was a reluctant supporter of church activities. He didn't come himself, but didn't prevent his wife from involving herself. But on occasion we got to chat, and he was getting on in years, and he was contemplating what would happen when he died. You have these cheerful conversations as ministers. And he said to me, do you know, he said, it will be as if I never lived. It will be as if I never lived. And I thought, how sad. How sad that your legacy for those who come after you will be nothing at all. As far as you're concerned, it will be as if you never lived. And actually, he lived a good life. Consultant in a local hospital, he helped many people. There would be many people who would come to his funeral and who would want to say thank you for what he did for them during his lifetime. But to him, it would be as if he had never lived. He pitched his tent, and when the time came, the tent was taken down, and the ground was as if he'd never been there. Our Jewish friends have a somewhat brutal outlook on death. We've inherited it in some of our hymns. Frail as summer's flower we flourish, blows the wind, and it is gone. It's not enough just to pitch one's tent. We are required to build an altar. To ensure that even after our time has passed, not so much people talk about us, but they talk about the life we lived in relationship with God. Too often we draw attention to ourselves when we ought to be pointing away from ourselves. I was struck by the decision taken by the late Pope Francis to be buried in the local parish church and just to have his name inscribed upon the tomb, Francis. Yes, the funeral itself had been embellished in the way it was. We realise that. And yes, in spite of what he wished, no doubt his tomb will become a place of pilgrimage, and it will not be tucked away in the way he thought it would be. But that was his intention. John Calvin insisted that he would be buried in an unmarked grave. So all those keen Protestants who make their way to Geneva, they comb their way through the graveyards, looking in vain for Calvin's tomb, because he did not want anyone to worship him, to make his resting place a shrine. He had built an altar. And of course, the most famous example we have in Scripture is of Moses, God calling him up to the mountain and saying to Moses, "There is the promised land. My people will enter it, but not you." And the story finishes by telling us that Moses died and was buried, and no one knows where. No one knows where. Building tents and building altars, living our lives, and leaving something behind, but not that which points to us, but points away from us and toward the God whom we loved and worshipped. Pitched his tent in a particular place, the story told us. He pitched it with Bethel on the one side and Ai on the east. The name Bethel means house of God. Beth is Hebrew for house, and El was a name being used for God prior to God's revelation of himself as Yahweh in the burning bush to Moses. He was known as El. Beth El. And Beth has become very popular with chapels. As you go around, you find many chapels which are Beth this or that. Lots of Bethels, the house of God. Well, you'd expect that, wouldn't you? Lots of Bethesdas. I was brought up in a Bethesda. House of mercy. What about Bethlehem? Bethlehem. The baker's house. House of loaves. The place to which you could go to buy your bread. And then what about Bethany? Lots of Bethanys. The house of the poor, or of the afflicted. A whole range of examples we have, house of this or that or the other. But for Abraham, he pitched his tent between the house of God and the city of Ai. Now, Ai crops up in the book of Joshua in a very obscure way, but it's an interesting story and a disturbing one in many ways, because the city of Ai, God commanded the armies of the Israelites to destroy the city of Ai, to leave not one stone standing, and to ensure that everyone who lived in the city of Ai was killed. Men, women and children. Ethnic cleansing on a grand scale. Genocide. Sometimes the Old Testament raises more questions than gives us answers. But we take the example of where the tent was pitched and apply it to ourselves. We live between God and the world. The temptation for us as Christians is to retreat into a holy huddle, to create a Bethel around us. Because life is tough today. The world is a difficult place. We would be better off out of it. So we take a step back. On the other hand, there is the temptation to become worldly, to be as the world would have us in order to make our way in the world. How can we impact ourselves upon the world if we're not part of it? And we find ourselves being seduced by the ways of the world, pulled away from God toward the world. Pilgrim's Progress is worth reading over and over again because it captures this most perfectly. We are between God and the world, and that is where we have to live and where our lives are lived. And yes, we face God and we worship God, but we also face the world and we engage with the world. The shadow of our eye is always cast over us, caused by the sunshine of God's presence. If there's sunshine, there's shadow, and that's how it is. And we live in a world pervaded by shadows. But there can only be shadows because there is sunshine. We are the sunshine of God's presence, shining into the world, exposing its shadowy ways. So we pitch our tent between Bethel and Ai. And we build an altar. The idea was that these altars would become a bit like stepping stones. That whenever a person had an encounter with God, they would leave a reminder to those who came afterwards that this was a place where God was encountered. So that when people came along after them, they too could have that sense of being in the place where God encounters people. So there would have been a succession of altars built through the desert places. A bit like a pilgrimage, creating steps along the way to know which way to travel to your ultimate destination. We're told Abraham built his altar so that those who came after him would know, yes, this was a place. We don't know who it was because the tent has been taken down. So we've no idea at all who it was who met with God at this place and at what time. None of that. But what we do know is because there is an altar, it was there, whenever, whoever, there was an encounter with God. The challenge for each one of us is to see to it that we build an altar, that our legacy to generations who come after us is not what we did, but what God did through us. Now that's not easy, because our natural inclination is to tie such experiences to the people concerned. But that can have difficult consequences, can't it? So think of all the controversies that have been most recently about money left in the names of individuals to do good, only to discover that those individuals were not the good people we thought they were. So I'll give you an example. When I was a teenager, I used to be very much into sort of heavy rock music. And we didn't have a place in Cardiff where you could go to hear the best bands. The nearest place was Bristol. And you'd go to Bristol and you'd go to the concert, and the concert always finished around 10:45, and the last train to Cardiff was 11:05. So you had to run from where the concert was to Temple Mead Station to get the train. And the place where the concerts were held were known at that time as the Colston Hall. Part of the life of Bristol, the Colston Hall. It was part of a legacy bequeathed to Bristol alongside other things by the Colston family. And we thank God for the way in which that money was used positively. And now we discover that Mr. Colston was a slave owner. That he made his money through slavery. So we've had to cross his name out, airbrush his name out of history. I don't know what they've renamed Colston Hall as, but they've renamed it as something. It's why I never want anything named after me, because I'm afraid what they'll discover after I've gone and cause an embarrassment. We're only human. We all have feet of clay. Sooner or later the statues come tumbling down. So we build an altar. We do not build it to ourselves. We build it to God. So in a few moments, we're going to celebrate communion. Now in our tradition, we don't have an altar. If I was to suggest to you that that was an altar, you'd all run a mile. Now our friends up the road have an altar, and they meet at the altar. We don't. We have a table. Sometimes the table is more precious than others. I can remember as children us sitting on the communion table and being told off. How dare you sit on the communion table? It's a special table. I said, it's a lump of wood, like any other lump of wood. For a few short moments, every now and again, it becomes something else, but otherwise it's a table. We don't have an altar. We have a table. But what we will do when we celebrate communion is to be reminded that Jesus lived and died amongst us. He pitched his tent. And however hard they've tried, they've never found his grave. Nowhere around Jerusalem where you can find a grave which has Jesus of Nazareth chiseled into it. They've looked long and hard because it would be a clincher, wouldn't it? To actually discover the place would prove that what is claimed was true. But no, his tent was taken down, that he bequeathed to us an altar of bread and wine, an altar of cross and empty tomb. A reminder to us that whenever we eat this bread and drink this cup, we proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. The writer of the letter to the Hebrews commended many in that chapter 11, gave Abraham more attention than anyone else, reminding the readers that it was by faith, believing that what was promised was true, he pursued his life. And there's a lovely phrase toward the end. And I'll illustrate it in this way, and then we'll move to the hymn and communion. When you've been in ministry for quite a while, you find you officiate at large numbers of funerals, just a fact of life. And you try to do your best to find something unique to say about the individual within the service itself. Particularly if you're in a local community and it's the same people who turn up to every funeral. I don't know if you're like that, but that's what happens. My dad used to read the death column in the South Wales Argus every week and find a funeral to go to. Always had a good tea, he said, to go to a funeral. But you try to find something to say. verse that I was saving up because I never quite knew who would be the person for whom it could be said. And it's those lovely words at the end of the passage we read, and God was not ashamed to be called his God. Such was the life of Abraham that God was humbled at the thought that Abraham put his trust in him. It's not that God put his trust in, it's Abraham had faith in God. And this was a humbling experience for God. Wow. I did use it, someone named Simon, because I have a feeling that's exactly how God would have felt about Simon. God was not ashamed to be called his God. There is no greater epitaph than we could leave than have that said of us and any who come after us. God was not ashamed to be called our God. We pitch our tent, we take it down, but we bequeath an altar. We are those in and through whom God has encountered his world, in and through whom he continues to encounter the world, through bread and wine and whatever other ways. We sing the hymn 315, I will sing the wondrous story of the Christ who died for me. 315.
Christ who died for me. so we come to celebrate communion together. An event that first happened many years ago. Jesus meeting with his disciples on that fateful evening, the night of his arrest, and sharing with them the Passover, during which they ate bread and drank wine, what came to be known as the Last Supper, the last opportunity they had of doing this together. They didn't realize it at the time. Everything would happen very quickly, but at the time, becomes the Last Supper. But we know it as the Lord's Supper, because we share this bread and wine in the light of the fact of the resurrection, that the Jesus who died has been raised from the dead, and that has enduring significance for us. It shapes the meaning of what we do when we come around this table. So yes, Jesus lived amongst us. He pitched his tent. His tent was pitched. He lived, he died, and no doubt for many people, the memory of who he was faded very quickly. He said and did certain things, but many others said and did the same. He was just one in a crowd. It was as if he had never lived. And yet for those who believed, that tent which had been pitched and taken down became an altar. A reminder to us in every generation that it was in and through Jesus that God encountered